All right, I'll just post this link up.
Okay, I can see you on the YouTubes now. So you probably want to mute your cameras and so on in the meantime.
Alrighty.
Otherwise, you'll appear in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, are we going to get started? Shall I tweet?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Vignesh, what do you reckon? We'll just let him work it out.
I think we'll make a start, everyone. So, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Cocoaheads. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Vignesh, and I'll be MC for tonight. So, unfortunately, due to the current pandemic, we've been required to take our meetup online. We've done our best to continue on, and we'll continue to deliver our meetups content in a new way. So before we begin, I'd just like to take us through for tonight's program. We'll have 2 talks tonight. So first, we'll have a talk by Tim Oliver on automating your releases with BuildKite. And then we'll have a second talk by Adam on lockdown communications. So all of our events are now going to be online. So they're organized on Slack. And also stay tuned on our meetup page for any updates on our events. As a trial of running this meetup online, we are hosting discussions and questions on the Melbourne Cocoaheads Slack group. So link is available in the YouTube live stream. Feel free to join the group, and the discussions are currently being held in the meetup channel. So on the topic of discussions, if you're either hiring or looking for work, feel free to head over to our jobs channel and take up the discussion in there. So we have a code of conduct in Melbourne Cocoaheads. Our community is dedicated to providing an inclusive environment for everyone, regardless of their background or their technology choices. So if you are being harassed, notice that someone else is in an uncomfortable position, or just have any concerns in general, feel free to get in touch with us. You can contact us on Slack, via email, or there's an anonymous form online as well you can use. And please note that the Melbourne Cocoaheads Slack group is also subject to our code of conduct. So questions. If you have any questions for our presenters tonight, feel free to ask them in our meetup channel. And the presenter will get back to you if and when they can. Volunteers. Melbourne Cocoaheads is always on the lookout for volunteers. There's many things that are involved with running a meetup group such as ours. So if you're interested, you can also head over to our volunteers channel and you can pick up the discussion in there. Speakers, if you're interested in presenting at Melbourne Cocoaheads, you can join us on the speakers channel in our Slack. Otherwise, you can send us a request on our website. Juniors are also welcome to speak at our meetup. There's 1 slot reserved for them every month, and we are able to offer them mentorship as well. And speaking as someone who has received this mentorship, it is quite invaluable. There's a lot of support and feedback we can offer to juniors, from finding a topic to talk about, to refining the presentation, even for things as simple as if you want someone to read through your slides before you present. We're all juniors, so we're all beginners at something, one way or another. So yeah, juniors are more than welcome to speak at our meetup. So I'd just like to thank our sponsors for tonight, our gold sponsor, EBD Apps, and our silver sponsors, Latitude Financial, Cognizant, REA, and AppScore. So without further ado, let's get into our first presentation for tonight with Tim. So Tim's been an iOS fanboy since the iPhone 3G and a full-time iOS engineer since the iPhone 5. Recently, he's been working as an iOS developer in Tokyo and has previously worked at Realm. In his free time, he enjoys contributing to the open source iOS community and playing the occasional video game. So without further ado, let's hand it over to Tim. Thanks, Tim. Oh, sorry.
Alrighty, how's this thing work? Screen sharing, right? Wait, you have to stop screen sharing first, apparently. Let's see if this works. Oh boy, technology. All right, see, is this working? This seems to be working, okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see that. What is that? There's a new folder icon that won't go away on my screen. Okay, that's weird. Okay, let's just roll that. Cool. Okay, thanks for having me, everyone. Everyone can hear me, right? Just thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, cool. Nice to meet you all. This has been it's been on my bucket list a little while to come to the Melbourne Cocoaheads. I'd say this counts as halfway. Hopefully, you can make it the whole way at some point. Once this is all over. But thanks again for having me, and thanks again to Matt Dells for suggesting I give this a shot. So today I'd like to talk to you about a little thing I've been working on for the last year. Basically, I've got a lot of stuff that I've been working on, and I've been playing with a thing called BuildKite, and I'll talk a little bit in a sec. Basically what I've learned in this whole process. But just as a quick disclaimer, forewarning and all that, I have no idea what I'm doing for most of the time. I basically came to this this conclusion by stumbling around in the dark aimlessly. So maybe there's a better way of doing it out there. In fact, I'm guessing there probably is a better way out there. So I'd love to hear your feedback at the end of this presentation about what could be done better. But in any case, this is what I've come up with on my own. I'd love to share it with all of you. So I do a lot of open source components for iOS. A lot of them are UI. Some of them are backend things. But most of them are UI. Things like I made a photo cropper in a photo cropping library, which has been actually used in quite a few live major apps, which is quite nice. I made a passcode. I made a ripoff of the lock screen passcode, which was good at the start, but apparently no one can use it because Apple keeps rejecting it for being a security breach. And the last thing I made was I built was a library that basically just watches the hard drive of any iOS device and then triggers off a notification whenever the user does something via some external file access endpoint, like in the Files app or through iTunes, and then triggers a notification in your app to let you know that a file's been modified. But the question is, why do you even bother just open sourcing this kind of stuff? Well, the main thing is I like open sourcing things because if I had to go through the effort to actually do this, clearly it meant that no one else had done it or had open sourced it. Usually that means it's either a niche or either it was a terrible idea. It was such a terrible idea that no one thought it was a good idea to do it in the first place. Either way, I'm happy to accommodate either of those. Because I invest the time in making something like this, I'd like to think that by adding it to the community, I'm also adding to my own value that I'm not going to be the only one using this code. Other people can use it. So thankfully, it helps justify the time I spent actually working on these things. It also gives me motivation to go the extra mile, things like actually thinking about the API design, adding comments, documenting and all that, just to actually improve the quality. So it helps me motivate myself to make it actually good. And these days, when you're working on any kind of software, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We've basically had we've had people before us actually come through and give us libraries that we're already taking advantage of. And the idea is, as long as you're using someone else's library, it kind of behooves us. We should all be chipping in because we're all in this together, chipping in and contributing our own software to this greater pool that we can use. The problem is, what's the catch with this? The main catch is the extra overhead of managing open source software is it does cut into time. Things that if you weren't actually managing separate repos over and over again, this all sorts of adds up. So for example, whenever you want to cut a release in open source, there's a bare minimum of things you have to do. The first one is you have to do you have to manually tag the release in Git. You have to update the pod. If you're supporting CocoaPods, you have to update the pod spec file with that tagged version. Then you have to push it to trunk in CocoaPods. If you're supporting Carthage, you need to have a dynamic or static framework. So you need to have a build target for frameworks. And this is, I'd say this is kind of necessary in this day and age. You also need to have a changelog where you've actually kept track of every single change you've added. But all these things add up. And the more repos you start having, the more projects you start having, this starts to compound itself. And it got to a point where I was starting to get kind of lazy and eschew like trying to avoid cutting new releases. Like people would file pull requests and say, "Hey, could you push a new release, please?" And I was starting to go like, "Oh, but it's so much effort. I don't know. Can we wait for a few more releases, a few more features to add before I push a release?" And then finally, at the start of last year, I kind of hit this point where I was like, "That does it. I kind of need a new process. Doing this manually is crazy." And so I started looking at how I'd actually automate this process. Now, originally I was looking at Travis. Travis is a pretty good one, but at the same time, there was a few things that were kind of eking me out. The main was, since a lot of these do still require private management and these things cost money, there was the pricing. Pricing was one thing, but the other thing was also the fact that Travis was recently, well, not recently anymore, was acquired by another company, and they laid off. Apparently, they laid off a lot of the staff. So it did look like Travis's future was kind of like in flux. And when you want to start relying on a platform really heavily, the promise that it might not be around, or it might not be around in the state you've committed to, is kind of not really that much of a good feel. So a couple of friends, I think friends from Melbourne actually, recommended this one called BuildKite. And BuildKite's actually by a Melbourne crew, which is amazing. And it's a bit different to things like Travis because it's not actually, it's a CI service, but you provide the hardware. It provides like the dashboard and the ability to manage things like compiled artifacts. So it manages the top layer really nicely. But at the low level, you actually have to provide the hardware, which I think is really good because it means that you can actually control everything in-house, and the pricing is kind of stable. And it also gives you a much greater degree of control because you can actually see exactly from the ground level what's going on. And another good thing I liked about it was I do intend to start running unit tests on some of my old iOS devices. So you can actually, since you've got access to the build devices, you can plug in old legacy iOS devices and run unit tests on those directly. So I went and bought a Mac Mini at the end of 2018, and that thing's been my build server for the most part. And that thing's now taking over releasing all of my projects via BuildKite. That being said, when I started, I had no idea what I was doing in terms of BuildKite, but thankfully BuildKite has a really nice Slack. And I was able to go there and ask a huge amount of really silly noob questions, and they were very, very nice in getting back to me. And they actually pointed me in the right direction. I was able to start putting together how to actually do this sort of automation. So the first thing I did was I was still a bit nervous that letting an external online dashboard execute commands on my Mac Mini might be a security risk. So the first thing I did was I actually made a VM in Parallels and set the whole thing up in Parallels. So that thing completely separated itself from my normal operating system. So that alone meant there was no risk to getting keys or anything like that, which is, I think at the very bare minimum is a very good thing to do. Another thing you could do is maybe just have a separate user in macOS land, but I think Parallels, having a VM, running in a VM is definitely the smartest thing to do. BuildKite allows for things like separate organizations. So at the beginning, I was thinking maybe I should put every single repo in its own little organization, but that ended up being like way too complex. And so the BuildKite folks recommended you just have just give one organization a crazy name. I called mine XDCI, and every single repo can have a single pipeline in there. And that thing will take commands from the GitHub repo as needed and will execute as desired. The way I've done it was actually really simple. It doesn't actually do a lot. All it does is when you execute the build command, it uploads a file called pipeline.release.yaml. And the way that BuildKite works is it lets you configure its operations through this YAML file. So you can actually customize it on a per repo level. So the YAML file looks like this. And basically what it does is it sets up a bunch of environment variables like the repo name, where the pod spec file is, where the P list for the framework is. And then it executes this little command at the bottom that actually downloads and executes a bash script, which I'll explain in a sec. And then it executes, once that's done, it executes Fastlane, which I'll explain afterwards. So what that's actually doing is it's a short URL that downloads this install script. And all that does is make sure that bundler is installed. Actually, no, it assumes bundler is already installed, but then it goes through and downloads a common gem file, which includes all the dependencies like Fastlane and CocoaPods, and then downloads a common fast file and puts these all into the repo at build time. I hope I don't have to explain what Fastlane is. I need no introduction at this point, but in case people don't know what Fastlane is a really cool suite of command line utilities that automate basically every single facet of iOS development. So even things like updating pod specs or generating screenshots for builds and pushing things to App Store Connect. This thing is really, really, really useful in the fact that it trivializes the amount of work you have to do down to like one line of Ruby code. The question is, why did I go through all this effort of having a separate bash script and having a separate gem file? The main reason was originally I actually had a separate fast file in every single repo that I had. But the problem was that meant if I wanted to refine the build process for one, I didn't have to go through and re-push that to all of them. So what I'm actually trying to do here is I've got all the repos have is that one BuildKite pipeline file, but everything else is one centralized source. And because all the repos are set up in the same folder structure, all I need to do is specify the names of the actual project, and the same fast file can be applied to every single one of these repos, and the outcome is the same. So the fast file looks like this. It's pretty big, it's pretty long. I'll step through it really, really quickly, what each parts do, but it's all open source, so I'll give you the link at the end of this presentation. The way you trigger it, some people like to do triggers by when they tag a release in GitHub, but I wanted to make it a bit more manual than that, just so I could actually make sure that everything's lined up and I can actually do it explicitly. So the nice thing about BuildKite is you can manually trigger builds. It's just a big button that says new build. And so whenever I want to trigger a new release, I made sure everything's working and it's not crashing. I go in there and I create a message. Usually the message is just release and then the new version number that I want to release. And what happens is that goes through BuildKite's pipeline and then exposes it to the fast file. And so how the fast file works is, number one is it extracts the version number from that message using a regular expression. And if it can't find one, it obviously fails out. Number two, it then opens a changelog and then does a more complex regular expression to go through the contents of the changelog and isolate the chunk of release notes just for this particular release. This is kind of manual. There are actually ways to automate generating changelogs, but they kind of required you to have formatted all your commit messages and pull requests nicely from the beginning, which a lot of these libraries I hadn't done. So in this case, I figured it would make more sense to explicitly enforce a changelog, and at the same time explicitly enforce that you've added an explicit entry for this release in the changelog before it lets you proceed. Step 3, taking that same version number, it then goes through the pod spec file and the info plist file and checks the version numbers in there. If they don't match, it updates them. And if either of them were out of date, then it actually commits those and then makes a push to master, this is the main amount of work because I kept forgetting to update the frameworks. And so having this automated is my favorite bit. And basically, this is what it looks like from inside the app itself, inside Xcode itself. Just updating the version number in the pod spec and the bundle version in the dynamic framework. After that, now that those things have been committed, now it's safe to actually tag the branches. This is another reason why I didn't want to rely on tagging, is because these two versions need to be up to date before the tag is applied. So this allows the explicit forcing of the ordering of which things get actually committed and etc. And then after that step, we take that chunk of the changelog that we extracted, and we actually make that a GitHub release. So we can actually make it a very nice formatted, accessible via the GitHub releases link, full-blown official release. And we can also upload it, not there at the moment, but additionally down the line, upload pre-compiled versions of the framework as well. And finally, the final step, once that's all done and everything's succeeded, we then make the push to CocoaPods trunk is the one that fails the most. So leaving this one at the end seemed to be the smartest thing to do. And once that's all done, we've successfully automated a release process, which is basically seven steps that you normally have to do manually, but that's all through one command on a website, which I could have done from my iPhone at a pub, which is was the main priority here. And I'm really, really happy that it actually worked out like that. That being said, it's not perfect yet. There's still a lot of things I need to add. Like I just said, the ability to offer both static and dynamically compiled frameworks for Carthage, and if the people want to install them manually, that's something I'm looking at the moment. I'm exploring whether it's worth still looking at fat binaries or if it's XC framework time. And this is particularly egregious. I've only looked at SPM, Swift Package Manager support, a little bit at this point, but I really need to get onto that and offer that in addition to CocoaPods and Carthage. In any case, the fast file and all my scripts are open source. The actual build kite pipelines aren't open, sorry, because they have my GitHub access token in there, so I can't really make that public. But definitely please check this out if you'd like to have a look. The code is in public domains. There's no licenses attached. Just go for broke if you want to give it a shot. And definitely check out BuildKite. I love it. I'm about to gear up a new app myself, and I'm going to run my entire CI through BuildKite. And I definitely recommend checking it out. It's also by Melbourne, so supporting local Melbourne software development is also really, really good. And that's basically everything. Thanks so much for watching. If you do have any questions, I'm in the Melbourne Cocoaheads Slack at the moment. But if you aren't in the Slack, you can also tweet at me at TimOliverAU. I think it's been clipped. But anyway, thanks again for watching, and I hope you learned something.
Yeah, thanks heaps for presenting, Tim.
Thank you.
Definitely enjoyed it. Lots of technical detail, and having worked with CI myself, it's definitely can be lots of fun, but it can be trolling at times too.
I can appreciate that. Yep. Excellent.
Cool. All right, I'll share my screen again.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Oh,
Just
man.
ask me to unmute. So you've been muted the entire time. You might want to do that again.
Oh, no. Sorry, everyone. So hard to miss the mute icon. That's all right. We'll just go through the slides quickly once again. Okay, yep. Before we get started on Adam's presentation, I just want to thank our sponsors again, EWD Apps and Latitude, Cognizant, REA, and AppScore. So our next presenter for tonight is Adam. So he has over 15 years of experience in the online video and broadcasting sector, and he's come from San Francisco. His company, App Demo Videos, has produced hundreds of technology product marketing, investor pitch, tutorial, and webinar-style videos for clients. Some of them including Microsoft, Netflix, HP, and the UN World Food Program. So yeah, without further ado, let's hand it over to Adam. Thanks, and thanks for pointing out that my mic was on mute the whole time as well.
No worries. I think multiple people were trying to warn you in Slack and in the Zoom chat, but you were obviously paying attention to the audience, which makes a lot more sense. Anyway.
Yeah, I figured while the Slack was going off crazy.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, hi everybody, and thanks for having me. I actually gave a talk to Cocoaheads last year at about this time on a different topic, but this seemed appropriate at the moment because everybody's either stuck at home or should be at home as much as possible and needs to be doing things like communicating for meetings, pitches, video conferencing online. So what I want to talk about is basically, and by the way, yeah, as he said, I am Adam from App Demo Videos, and we do marketing, training, tutorial, investor pitch videos for clients of all different sizes. A few little examples that are things we've done in the past for a variety of clients. It really ranges from videos for apps through to videos of massive enterprise systems, as was already said. So I won't spend too much time on that. The overview of what I do want to talk about today is pretty simple. It's about how when you go live from home, you can look and sound as good as possible, and also how you can do some certain things to maybe share your tech in a more compelling and interesting way than maybe just sending somebody a link or even doing a live demo, because live demos are fraught with problems. As in a sense, we just saw that, you know, with a technical audio issue, there was a major problem in the presentation. So first up, I want to talk about sound. Sound is incredibly important. It's actually a lot more important than visuals for most online meetings. I want to talk about visuals, which are the second most important thing or the most important thing, depending on how you're approaching this. And then I want to talk about you, and not really your behavior so much, but a few things that you should really keep in mind when you are going live from home. And then talk a little bit about live streaming video and what that can be used for and what maybe it isn't great to use it for. And then a little bit, just very briefly, about how you can do hybrid pre-recorded and live videos that are actually a really good way to get certain points across in a way that's a lot less stressful than being fully live. So to start off, audio. There's a big difference between understandable audio and good audio, and you should aim for understandable rather than good in most cases. So here with me, I'm talking into a professional microphone. I've got a camera, I've got a mixer here, a video mixer set up that I can share with you, but most people don't have that at home. What you do have is a variety of different devices that can capture audio and video, and you don't have to use the same one for all purposes. So understandable versus good. The choice of what microphone you use is really, really important when you're communicating with people when you're not in person. And I don't think that everybody should go out and buy a $5,000 voiceover microphone, or even go out and buy anything. You might actually have a very good solution for video conference audio at home. If you have a set of Bluetooth headphones, a set of wired headphones that has a microphone built into them, it could actually be substantially better than the microphone built into your laptop or into your smartphone. And test that out. Try the various devices that you have. If you have a pair of Bluetooth headphones that you go wear to the gym, then hook those up. Just connect them to the audio recorder on your phone or on your computer and do a test recording. Do several test recordings with whatever devices you have. Try the earbuds that came with your phone. If you, as most people here I assume are, if you're an iPhone user and a Mac user, you can use the wired headphones that come with most iPhones pre-Lightning to plug directly into a Mac and get access to that microphone, which is closer to your mouth. The big difference here is trying to get the sound captured as close to your mouth as possible. As you can see, I've been doing some podcasts and other things, so I've got this big microphone set up that's really just a few centimeters from my mouth. And the difference in sound is tremendous compared to having a microphone that's even just sitting on the desk where the computer is. So a big difference in microphone placement, and the microphone quality is often tremendously outdone by the microphone placement. You can put a bad microphone close to you and you'll sound much better than with a good microphone too far away. So that's on microphones. And again, sometimes less is more. You don't need a big fancy microphone. It may actually be a problem if you have, say, a USB podcasting mic and you don't put it close enough to your mouth, then it'll sound worse than using the cheap earbuds that came with a phone close to your mouth. So experiment and test before you do audio in a phone call. And then know how to use it. As I said, put it close to you rather than put it far away, and see how that works out. Room choice is another big problem, another big issue that comes up. If people are trying to pick the nicest looking room in their house, for example, in this this graphic that I just downloaded from someplace, this is a very bad room to do a video conference in for a couple different reasons. First of all, the walls are really hard or glass in the case of the windows. You're right near a lot of noise sources. This looks like a busy street in New York City. And the lighting is also bad, but I haven't gotten to visuals yet. So you want to be in a place with a lot of soft stuff to get the sound to be as good as possible and not be distracting. You don't want echoes. So a bedroom is actually much better than say a dining room or a kitchen. Absolutely. Certainly everybody knows that there's a lot of reverb and echo in the bathroom. So you don't want to be doing any kind of conferencing in any kind of really hard room, but a bedroom or even going into the wardrobe, if you really need to record good audio, it's a trick that voiceover artists use to take a microphone into the wardrobe surrounded by clothing, and you can get a good little sound booth in that space without having to build or buy anything. So room choice makes a big difference. So test the room before you're out there trying to actually do a presentation, a pitch, a webinar, and could have a lot of audio issues during that you don't really know about. And then minimizing noise. As I said, this is a noisy place in that picture. You want to make sure that whatever noises are going to happen outside or inside your home, you can control as much as possible. You can't control everything. They're building a new apartment building a block from my apartment, and they're doing pile driving for the last week. So it is not always something you can control, but you can control things, certainly like alarms on your phone. You can make sure to turn notifications off on your computer and on your phone, and other things that you don't necessarily think of. If you have a smart device, whether it is a smart speaker or even a smart watch, these things can beep, buzz, cause noises that you don't really expect. I heard a story of someone who was doing a video job interview with Apple recently, and their Alexa started to talk in the middle of the interview. So not only was that a distraction, but it was actually showing that they owned and used a competitor's device. So making sure to unplug any of those things and minimize whatever noises. Make sure that kids, relatives, dogs, whatever, they're in as far away from you in the house as possible when you're doing important things on online audio or video. So on the video side, for visuals, the most important thing is the lighting. And you might notice, if I switch back to my view here, even though it's dark, I have lights. That's because I've actually set up 2 lights on either side of the camera. They're kind of off in this direction where you can't see them. They're not behind me. And more importantly, they're actually, because they're directional lights, they're pointed at a white wall that's right there instead of at me. So you get a lot more natural light. It's more like light coming in from a window. If it's not night, then definitely put a window behind your camera and try to get as much natural light and as much good light as possible. But even just 2 lamps, one on either side of the camera, or 1 lamp directly behind the camera, but not too close, can make a big difference in lighting. And then back to the slides, the camera angle and location is another big factor in how you look. You've probably all seen people who actually, in this example, that image of the iPhone, or I think that's an Android phone actually in this case, with someone who's trying to do a video conference. It's looking up from below at him, and that's not a flattering position. It makes you look very large. It can make you look overweight, and it's a bit distracting at some points. Don't put the camera too high though, because if you put the camera too high, it starts to make you look really small. It can make you look thin, but it also makes you look small. So really the best place to put the camera is directly at eye level in front of your face. So I'm talking to a camera that is directly at eye level, maybe a tiny bit below in this case, could be a tiny bit above, but that's the most flattering and the most normal position to have a conversation with somebody. So if you're just using your laptop, then take some books, take a laptop stand and put it under the laptop, raise it up so that the camera is at eye level. But you don't actually always have to use your laptop either. I'll actually get to that in a second. So put it at eye level. This also has audio advantages. The audio advantages of it having it at eye level is basically getting it off of the desk, because if you are in a situation where you're going to be, say, have a phone sitting on the desk that is set on vibrate, if that vibration goes off, it'll be picked up very loud in the microphones of the computer that's also sitting on the desk. So if you can raise that up off the desk, it helps avoid random noises, and it also keeps you from poking at the keyboard on your laptop. Don't touch, don't click, don't type if you're in the middle of a video conference and you're using the microphone that's built into the laptop. And if you are using the microphone that's built into the laptop, raising it up closer to eye level gets it closer to your mouth. So on that next point that I was going to say was making sure that the background is also acceptable. You know, I'm just in the spare bedroom in my apartment, so I don't have a great background, but it's not a busy background. It's not something that's distracting. I don't have kids or dogs or birds or whatever else coming around in the background. And that's something to definitely keep in mind. Have it be shallow if at all possible. A deep background can look nice if you're sure nobody's going to be back there. But if you have any doubt that there could be any motion back there, don't allow that background to be visible. Use something with less depth and basically make it as boring as possible. And then camera options. This is what I was going to get to before. You don't have to use the camera built into your laptop. You don't have to use a fancy camera here. This is very similar to the camera that I'm actually using to talk to you right this moment, but you don't need something like this. You could actually do better or almost as good with just pulling a selfie stick that you got from somewhere out, putting your phone in it and raising that up to eye level. A selfie stick wedged in or taped to something to get it up to eye level is a great way to have a conversation with somebody and have it look real, because you can, one of the big advantages of a smartphone is that the camera and the screen are very close to each other. And even on a laptop, because the screen is so large, if you're looking at the laptop, the images on the laptop, instead of looking into the camera, if I switch and demonstrate. So if I'm looking into the camera, it looks like I'm talking to you. If I look at where the visuals of the other person would be on a laptop, then it doesn't look like I'm talking to you at all. It's like kind of like I'm staring off into space. So putting something, putting a phone in front of you or potentially a tablet is a great way to get those visuals a little bit closer to normal when you're talking to people. So then, okay, going live from home, what about the you part? And I'm not just saying, you should dress well and comb your hair and make sure to put on a decent shirt. I think you can all get that. What I'm really talking about is things that you won't think of besides, dress as if you're at work, or maybe as if you're more than at work if you're really trying to sell, if you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to do whatever. What you should really think of is all the things that could get in the way of you having a conversation that is natural when you're conversing online. Number one, make sure that you have water next to you and make sure you have extra water. You don't want to run out of water, and you don't want to get in a situation where somehow, let's say you had a water bottle and it's closed and you knock it over and it rolls off the desk and you have to disappear to go grab it. If you had 2 water bottles, that would make a big difference. That may seem like over preparation, but depending on what you're doing, if you're doing an investor pitch, if you're doing a job interview, being able to not have to crawl under the desk while you're trying to sell a product makes a really, really big difference. Definitely check any reflections, especially if you're someone who wears glasses. There can be a lot of distracting reflections, and they can differ at different times of day. So if you're going to be doing a video call at 2 p.m., make sure to take your laptop to the place you plan to do it at 2 p.m. Make sure that you put your glasses on if you're going to be wearing glasses, and see what those reflections look like, and also see what the lighting looks like, because it's not just about the reflections that are coming off of anything you're wearing, but they could be things in the room. Anything reflective can cause weird lens flare and other things on the computer. So make sure that you check for reflections on you and other places, and just check for general lighting, whatever time of day it is that you're going to be doing the call. Even if you're preparing a day beforehand, try to do it at the same time of day and see what that's like. And then this sounds kind of simple, but make sure that you're sitting in the right chair. And that's not necessarily the most comfortable, your great office chair, because when you put somebody in a chair with wheels or that swivels, they will swivel, they will fidget, and that can be distracting. So try not to give yourself the opportunity to do things that are distracting. Try not to put something in your reach that you can play with if you're someone that fiddles with things with your fingers, especially if it's something that makes noise like a pen. So choose the right chair, choose the right environment, and then ultimately just talk to the camera. Like as I said, there's a big difference between talking into the lens and talking to somewhere else, or even looking off to the side if you have a webcam somewhere else. If you can learn to talk right into the camera, that makes a big difference. And if you have trouble talking into the camera, a couple of tips that I learned back when I used to be on live television was if you're talking to a remote camera and there's not a person there, you can actually take a couple of ping pong balls or something else and put them on above the lens. If you have a camera with a lens that protrudes, and it kind of gives it eyes like a puppet, you can talk to that puppet. If you're just using your laptop and you have a little stuffed animal or something else like that you can have peek over the camera right near the camera on the laptop and talk to that instead of talk to the camera, it can be more comfortable than talking to the camera in the abstract and just trying to focus on something that's admittedly a bit disconcerting unless you get used to it. So what about the live streaming part? Well, if you're not just doing a Zoom meeting or whatever particular platform you may be using instead of Zoom because you're concerned about their privacy, the live streaming piece, like we're live streaming to YouTube. You can live stream to Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live. You can do Twitch streaming. You can do all sorts of different things. Even live streaming now on Twitter, on Instagram, on other social media. So when you're doing live streaming, the purpose should be not just to produce a video, but you need to have a better reason than that, because a pre-produced video is probably going to have better production values. It's going to be easier to watch, and it's going to be easier to re-watch than something that was just recorded live. So the real reasons to do live streaming video are things like trying to engage with audiences in real time. The fact that all of you can put questions in the Slack channel, which I'm not reading at the moment, but I will look at as soon as I get down to the end of these slides. You can have interactions where you could put up a poll and someone can reply to that, and you can then use that to guide what comes up next in the presentation. It's a way to really engage with your audience in real time. That's a big advantage of live streaming and a reason to be doing live streaming. It also can give you a behind the scenes, or give your viewers a behind the scenes look at your business, your product, yourself, something that's a little bit different than what you'd produce in a really slick pre-produced video. So giving that behind the scenes look, being able to bring other people in, it really can humanize your company, humanize your product. So another reason to do live streaming is to make it feel more comfortable, make it feel more real than maybe a too slick, overproduced presentation in that case could be. And then it's really great to highlight connections, and of course, when events are allowed, to stream events. So if you have any guests, if you have anybody else that is coming in to work with you, and you want to highlight their expertise, and by extension, the fact that you are working with someone with that expertise, it is a great time to do that. So you can have conversations, you can do interviews, and certainly the #1 use of live streaming video in a normal situation where we're not all stuck at home because of the pandemic is to make events accessible to people who can't come. And so live streaming events is certainly a great thing to plan to do all the time whenever you have events, but doing it right is something that can be pretty complex. And that's really outside the scope of what I was going to talk about today, because just setting up an iPhone on a tripod is not really the easiest, or well, it is the easiest, but it's not the best way to do live streaming. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about that afterwards if you have questions, or offline if you're curious about it. So really, the big advantages of live streaming video are that it's less production time. It takes more planning though. So if you're thinking about doing this, you should really consider how much effort it goes into making sure that everything goes smoothly. It may be more comfortable for some people. This seems a little counterintuitive, but some people are happier talking to a camera knowing there's someone on the other side. If you're talking to a camera in the abstract and saying, okay, I'm going to record this and someday somebody's going to watch it, that can be a little bit more stressful for some people. Although knowing that there are live viewers out there can also be stressful. It definitely has higher engagement rates during the presentation, but not necessarily afterwards. And it can be recorded for the future, but it's not a good way to produce a pre-recorded video, because ultimately On the cons side, it doesn't really work unless you have an audience. If you have that audience, it can be dynamic, it can be interesting, it can be a reason to be producing this content. But if you don't have an audience, it's basically just winging it to the camera, and winging it to the camera is not the best way to produce a really high quality video. The other big thing that comes up is that there are technical problems that are always ready to pop up anytime you're doing anything live, and certainly live online and live streaming online makes that potentially quite a bit worse. And related to that, you don't get any chance to redo anything. So if something is said wrong, if something goes wrong, if there is an issue like the sound not being turned on when somebody's trying to speak, then that is out there, and everybody's feeling uncomfortable as whatever problem is being has come up is being solved. Even Steve Jobs, when he was doing keynotes, ran into several situations where a device didn't work right and had a bad reaction more than once, and that then ends up out there live, versus if it was a pre-recorded session, you could edit that out. And ultimately, it takes more planning than you think to do these kind of things. But one of the big advantages of the way online video can be used, especially in the case of, say, doing a sales pitch or doing an investor pitch, is that you can actually do a hybrid of live and recorded. So you can include pre-recorded video in slide form or through some other device to combine with what it is you're saying live. So a great example of this, something that we've put together as a simple example. We've made these for clients, but we can't share the actual client one. So this is one based on the Apple podcast app, just to say, let's say I wanted to pitch my product to investors, or I wanted to talk about my product to a large audience online live. When it came time to do the live demo, the actual demo of the product, that's when things get hairy. That's when things get scary, ultimately. Is this going to work? Especially if it's a beta product, but is it going to work? And what could go wrong? Even just a problem of an internet connection. But if you pre-record the pieces of what you're trying to do as a demo and play them in a way that is still dynamic, then you can really connect with your audience and make them really understand it, and not even have them ultimately realize or have it sink in that it's not live. So for example, this is a video chopped up into pieces that I can say, all right, here's my app. I want to show you that you can very easily scroll through a list of available podcasts, look for something that you're interested in. And then if I want to talk about that a little more, I can wait. If I want to go right on to the next thing, I can say, just, switch tabs over to the already subscribed shows and then look in there. So I have control over when I switch slides, when I scroll, or when I tap something by cutting this video up into little pieces. You can do the same thing. This is a more complex video, obviously, because we've edited a real video of someone touching and interacting with a phone, but you could do that with a screen recording of something. You could even, if you wanted to, pretend that you were doing it live as you were standing there at the laptop and poking it at the keys, but have a screen recording playing. If it's controllable, though, that makes a big difference. And we've made these for several clients that have used them in investor pitches very successfully. So I can, again, I can say, hey, here's a great example of a podcast. If you want to hit play, just go up and if you want to play it, you can go up and tap and play whatever episode you want. And then you can jump right in and, control it. Look at the album art. These are all things that you can choose to say, you can skip over, you can just, quickly glide by if it's something that you really want to get the point across more quickly. It's all controllable if you've pre-recorded the live demo and then done it. But in a live demo situation, especially for a mobile app, as an example, let me grab a phone here. So if I want to share, and you can do this on Zoom, if I want to share the output of a phone, you can share it directly, but it's a lot different experience there, scrolling through this with a little bit of lag and jitteriness and not being able to see where I'm touching. If I want to open up this mini motorways and touch it, it's hard to follow, but it's much easier to follow if you've pre-recorded it and make it look good. So you can have a big difference in what the live demo portion is, whether it is of a mobile app or whether it's of a desktop or a web app, by pre-recording those pieces and putting it together. So that hybrid thing is something that I really advocate for, and it's something that is pretty easy to do. Even if you are just doing a screen recording like this, you can pre-record that screen recording and then use that to your advantage later. So that's the end of what I had to say overall. We said about 20 minutes, and I think I just spent 21.5 minutes or something like that on it. So I'm happy to talk at the end if we're going to do any kind of group questions, or I can answer questions in the Slack channel. But if you want to get in touch with me or get any other information, my contact info is right there. And if someone's interested in a video, whether it's a video for live pitching, or if it's something that, for example, right now, app preview videos for the iPhone App Store are more and more important every year. And certainly now that people are shopping for apps in larger numbers from home, we've seen increases in conversion rates noted from between 20 to 50% by adding those kind of things. We're offering a discount if you want to do that. So that code down at the bottom, MCH0420, Melbourne Cocoaheads, basically, April 2020. Get in touch with me with that discount code, or go to our website and enter it when you get in contact, and we can certainly work out some discount if you're interested in our services. So that's the end of what I had to say, and happy to figure out how we're going to do this next bit of discussion, or just answer questions on Slack.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, discussions are happening both in the meetup channel in the CocoaHeads Slack. I believe there's a discussion happening on YouTube, but we're probably going to. I'm not sure if they'll continue after the live stream finishes. So probably the CocoaHeads Slack, if you're already part of that meetup, the meetup channels where all the discussions happening. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, we definitely enjoyed your presentation, given the fact that we're all relying on video these days with our live streaming out of necessity and all sorts of meeting events that are being held across companies. Yeah, we definitely appreciated your insights from a professional around this particular area. So yeah, thanks very much for presenting.
Yeah, definitely. I can see a bunch of questions in here, so I can reply there, or if there's going to be an informal conversation afterwards, I'm happy to join in.
Okay, so we'll just. Cool. So once again, thanks for attending this online meetup, everyone. So if you want to get more updates around Mobile Cocoaheads, there are links below here that have all of our social media on there, and our talks tonight are also being recorded, and they'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel at some point. So events generally run on the second Thursday of every month. So our next meetup is going to fall on the 14th of May. So look forward to seeing you all then. And until then, have a great night. And also, there will be an online drinks event that one of our community members, Baz, is holding. So I'll post the link both in our Slack group and on YouTube as well. So feel free to join us there afterwards. Till then, have a great night. Have a great Easter. Thanks, everyone.